Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you all for joining me today. We're going to get started in a quick minute. I'm going to share a poll with you guys real quick first to give people time to get in and get settled, and also to just gauge where everybody is in their tax prep for this year so far. So this poll is going to pop up to the right in a second. It's going to ask you guys, hey, tax day is around the corner. How are you doing with preparing your taxes? Have you started yet? Maybe you haven't started at all. Maybe you're done. Let us know when you see that poll pop up to the right. We're actually going to hop into things right away today because we have lots to talk about, and I want to make sure we are able to get to everything. So, again, just welcome. My name is Nicole. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at the Neat Company, and I'm excited to talk to you guys today about, how Neat can help you get organized and prepare for tax season with ease. With me today, I have George and Melissa, who are two of our customer success leads here at the Neat Company. And they're here to help me answer all of your Neat related questions. So if there's a question that pops up in your mind as we go, you can feel free to pop that question in the chat box to the right, and we're going to get you an answer as soon as we can. So let's get into it. Here is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about tax preparation, obviously, and we're going to talk about how Neat can help you prepare and get organized for tax season all year long, not just at tax time, but throughout the year. We'll share a bunch of tips on the types of documents that you need for tax filing, how you can ensure your data is accurate for tax filing, especially when it comes to those deductions, and also how you can use Neat to prepare your tax return. I also have several downloadable handouts to share with you guys today, going all the way to the very end of the webinar. So make sure you stick around for all those. I think I have 5 in total. I also have a demonstration for you guys as well. We're going to do a demonstration of the Neat expense report. We're also going to talk about why that specific Neat report is so useful when it comes to preparing your taxes. We'll also take a quick look at some of the other tax type reports that are available in Neat. And then I'm also going to show you guys how you can, once you have all your tax documents prepared, how you can actually share them out of Neat with yourself or someone in your company or a CPA or accountant or whoever might be filing your taxes. At the very end, we'll do a quick Q&A session with whatever time we have left. Now, before we dive in, I did want to make an important disclaimer that we are not tax professionals. I'm not a tax professional, and George and Melissa aren't tax professionals either. So if you have any specific tax-related type questions, we're not going to be able to help you with those types of questions. I recommend that you connect with a trusted tax professional, a CPA, or an accountant for any questions like that. However, what we can help you out with is how you can use Neat to prepare your tax return efficiently. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So filing your tax return can feel really overwhelming, and there's a lot of pressure behind preparing your tax return because if there are any mistakes, those can lead to real world consequences in, audits or missed tax deductions and things like that. So our goal today is to simplify that process and give you some straightforward steps to organize your tax documents in Neat and get them prepared for tax time. Really, the key to a smooth tax season is organization. So to get started, we're going to quickly look at this high level and simplified view of what steps you need to follow to prepare and submit your tax return and how Neat can help you with these steps. So here's the simplified step-by-step guide for preparing your tax return. First, you really need to gather all your necessary documents that you need to submit for your tax return. Those primarily include things like your income documentation and your expense documentation. You also need to choose a filing method. You've got to decide if you are going to submit your tax return yourself or if you need to hire a professional excuse me, who can help you with filing your taxes. Now, a tax professional can really help with step number 3, which is to maximize those deductions. Deductions can work for you by helping to reduce the amount of taxes that you owe and also increase your overall tax refund. Neat can really help you stay on top of your deductions too, so long as you stay organized and you make sure that your data is accurate. Before submitting your return, you want to check and make sure that there are no errors in your data. You want to double check that all the information that you're providing, things like your bank information, your social security information, is all accurate. And if you can, it's best to file your return electronically. And that's because electronic returns are much faster, they're more straightforward, and they lead to fewer errors in submitting your tax return than you might experience with filing via paperwork or the snail mail way. And lastly, you want to also track and save your refund once you get it. So electronic refunds typically take or process within about 21 days, so it's pretty quickly. And once you get that tax return, you want to make sure that you save a copy of it in Neat or somewhere, and you want to store that copy for at least 3 years, just in case you need it for reference later because of an audit or something, or if you need it to file your taxes the following year. So we're going to talk about how Neat can help you with steps 1, 3, 4, and 5 today. So let's go ahead and get into that. And while we do, I also want to share another poll with you guys right now. This poll is going to ask you whether or not you're preparing taxes for yourself, or you're preparing taxes for your business, or maybe you're doing a combination of both. So let us know when you see that poll pop up to the right. This will be helpful because we're going to share some handouts in a moment here that are related to whether or not you're filing as a business or individually. So let's go here. So again, the first step in preparing your tax return is gathering all the necessary documentation you need for the return. Here is actually a high-level overview of common documents needed to file a tax return. Additional documents may be required based on your unique situation, but it basically comes down to these things here. You have your income documentation, things like your W-2s, your 1099s, other wages and tips and other compensation that you've received throughout the year. You have your expense documentation, receipts for medical expenses, childcare, education, and other expenses that can be counted as a tax deduction. You have bank records, things like your savings statements, interest income, and other records like this that you can include in your tax deductions. And lastly, a copy of your prior year's tax return. And this is really going to help with just maintaining consistency in your filings and also to ensure that you don't miss anything from year to year. So we're actually going to share 2 tax preparation checklists with you all right now. And these checklists go into a lot more detail about all the types of documentation that you might need to prepare your taxes, or to prepare your tax return, I'm sorry. We have a checklist for both individuals and business owners. So depending on how you're using Neat, you can download one or both of these checklists. They're going to pop up right now. You'll see the first one for business is going to pop up, and then the second one is going to be for individuals. So you can feel free to download these and keep these for yourself. Like I said, they're a checklist. So you could actually, figure out which of the documents on that list you definitely need for your tax return, and you can use the list to keep track of which documents you've collected and which ones you still need to collect. So again, step number 1 is gathering all of this documentation together. And again, this is where Neat can really help you stay organized and on top of your tax documents that you need for preparing your taxes. A lot of Neat's benefits really come from getting and staying organized before tax season even starts. Neat is really going to take all this documentation and transform it into usable, searchable data, making it easier for you to organize all these files and also share them with your tax professional as well when it comes time to share them. We have a couple tips that we're going to talk about quickly before we get into our demonstration. about how you can organize your documents and prep for tax season all year long so that when it comes time to gather all this documentation together, you're ready to go. So let's go into our next slide for that. So the first tip that we have for getting and staying organized all year long is by creating a folder in your Neat cabinet or in whatever organization system you're using, just simply called tax documents, and that you store all the tax documents that you require throughout the year in this folder. Keeping all your tax documents in one folder is going to simplify organization so much. It's going to also reduce the chance of errors in your tax return because it's going to minimize the risk of overlooking or missing documents or expenses that you might have saved in a multitude of folders across your database. So a centralized folder is going to make it super easy for you to find everything that you need when you actually need it. And with all of the files stored in the same folder, especially in Neat, it'll make it much easier for you to run reports on that data and also share that data with your CPA or accountant, or just export it when you need to later on. So I actually want to pop into my own Neat account real quick, and I just want to talk with you guys more about the best ways to save your documents in Neat, and also the best way to save your expenses in Neat for creating reports for your deductions later on. So let me just open up my Neat account here, and I'm going to share that screen. All right, perfect. Here is my Neat account, and here is my cabinet over here to the left. We can see my cabinet is broken down into 5 parent folders, and one of them is simply called tax documents. And I do create subfolders under my main tax documents folder, one for each year. I find that to be a lot easier because you have a new W-2 every year, you have new forms every year that you need to fill out. And so, creating a years for each of your tax documents makes it much easier to share that specific year's tax documents out of Neat when you need to. And when I come to my tax documents folder, I have a bunch of stuff in here. So I have some of my income documentation in here, like my W-2. I also have a couple of my forms in here, like my 1095 form, my 1098 form, and my 1099 form for my HSA contributions. I also have a copy of my previous year's tax return in here because, again, that you're going to need that for filing your taxes. I also have some other expense reports that I create, or tax reports that I created in here earlier, but we're going to talk about these in a little bit. So right at the get, I have everything, all of this income documentation and a lot of the other documentation that I need for filing my taxes. It's going to make it much easier for me to share all of these files together later on. So that's like the overall tax documents. But the bigger question that we get is, how do I store my expenses in Neat that could be used as deductions? There are 2 common ways that users store or organize their expenses in Neat. Either they store all of their receipts in a folder for the entire year. So they will upload everything to Neat and store every expense, every receipt in one 2024 or 2025 expenses folder. The other common way is that users will create folders for various projects or properties or clients, and then they'll store their expenses in those various projects and clients and properties folders across their databases. Now, my personal preference is to store all of my receipts in one centralized expenses folder for the year. So like I have this expenses folder here, and then I have, similar to my tax documents, I specify which year it is associated with which folder and those expenses. And so like I have all my 2024 expenses here in one folder. The reason that I like to store all my receipts in one centralized folder for the year is, partially for the same reason why I like to store all my tax documents in one folder. For one thing, it's going to be easier to access and find receipts I need when I need them, but it's also going to make it much easier for me to be able to run reports with this data and share this data later when I need to. When I store my receipts across multiple folders in my database, then there's more chances for me to miss receipts or expenses in my final expense report for the year. Now, if you prefer to store documents in your various clients and projects and properties folders, that is perfectly fine. You can absolutely do that. But let me offer a couple alternatives to you as well. So if you prefer to store documents in different project folders and things like that, one thing that you could do, for example, is like I have this business folder here, and I have this folder called trips for trips that I take throughout the year that typically are reimbursable. So I have, like, for example, this trip that I took to Valley Forge last year for a convention. I have 11 receipts in this folder. I can store all those receipts in my Valley Forge convention folder because that's what I prefer. But for tax time, what I can do is I can utilize the copy feature in Neat. So I could select all of these receipts in here, right click on all of them, and choose to copy all of these receipts to one folder that I can use for preparing my taxes. So I can copy this, and I can copy all of these expenses to my 2024 expenses folder. I could do this for all of my different projects and clients. And what will happen is Neat will just create copies of all of those files and save them all together in my 2024 expenses folder. And now what I've done is I have all of these receipts across various projects and folders that way, but I also have a copy of them in this 2024 expenses folder, which is going to make reporting easier later. The main reason why reporting will be easier later is because when you're filtering reports in Neat, you can only select one folder at a time during that filtering process. So if I have expenses across multiple folders in my database, then I can't just filter my report by folders. I have to filter my report by dates. And then I also have to be careful about making sure I'm not mixing personal or business expenses together, or including receipts or expenses in that expense report that shouldn't be there. So by having all of my receipts in one folder, I can much more easily filter and create an expense report later on. Another suggestion I might have for you, if you are tracking your documents by projects or clients or properties, is utilizing the actual categories for those instead. So we have categories for customer, for project, product, location, class here. Class you can really use as to track anything you want. You don't have to just track class in there. Class was actually something that was added to Neat a very, very long time ago, which has to do with receipt classifications. Or back in the day where there were different receipt classifications, so you could put the receipt class here in the receipt classification field. But instead of utilizing a folder structure that breaks everything down by project or customer or location, you could use these categories instead to track all of those things. So you could have all of your expenses dumped into one folder, but be able to easily organize and separate them by customer or project, product, location fields here. So those are, some suggestions that I have for how you can kind of like reorganize or organize your folder structure to make it as easy as possible to do your taxes later on. Again, the first organization tip was to really simplify your tax documents folder structure. Really, a best practice in Neat is that the fewer folders, generally the better. It's just going to be easier to find things later on. Let's pop back into our slides now. Let's talk about some other Neat tips. So the next tip that I have for you guys for getting and staying organized all year long for tax time is to track your expenses in real time. Not just at tax time. You don't want to do it just at tax time. This is going to make tax time so much less stressful. And I don't know, maybe you're not surprised to hear that a significant portion of Americans tend to procrastinate when it comes to filing their taxes. And actually, according to a recent analysis by NBC News, approximately 43 million people, or nearly 30% of all taxpayers, wait until the final 3 weeks leading up to tax day to even start preparing their tax return. And, just kind of based off of the poll that we shared earlier, 24% of the people who joined here today haven't even started preparing their taxes or anything. So you guys are pretty in line with the 30% of taxpayers who also wait until, the last minute to kind of organize and prepare their tax return. Now, tracking expenses in real time is really going to prevent errors in your data. It's going to reduce that tax time stress, and it's also just going to help you maximize those deductions. And an added benefit is that it'll just generally boost your financial awareness to help you make smarter spending, budgeting decisions throughout the year as well. So we're going to talk about some neat tools now that help you get and stay organized all year long. Really, half the battle is getting all of your tax documents and your expenses into Neat and organized. And Neat offers many tools for you to be able to get your files into Neat. We have the traditional scanning method with a scanner. We also have mobile capture with the Neat mobile application to capture stuff on the go. We have email forwarding. This allows you to forward emails directly from your email account, receipts, e-receipts, things like that, directly to Neat. You don't need to print it or export it or import it. You can simply forward it directly to Neat with email forwarding. We also have the print to Neat feature. This is a Windows-only feature that allows you to forward confirmation pages, web pages directly to Neat. There's importing, so you can import from the web application or the mobile application. And then there's also automatic transaction streaming, which actually allows you to connect your financial accounts directly to Neat to make sure that you don't miss a single expense throughout the year. So you want to make sure you're utilizing all the ways that you possibly can to add your expenses to Neat. If you can utilize more than one way to send your files to Neat, that will significantly help you stay on top of your expenses year round instead of waiting until things pile up at the end of the year, or maybe you only do, look at your expenses on a monthly basis. Uploading them in real time, throughout the year is going to help significantly with getting and staying organized. We recommend, tracking your expenses real time and utilizing all the ways that you can upload files to Neat. But another important component in tax preparation and tracking your expenses in real time in general is making sure that that data is accurate, especially your expense data, such as your total amounts, your dates, your expense categories, your sales tax, and things like that. Data accuracy is the most important characteristic that makes your data usable. Incorrect, incomplete, or inaccurate data will impact your reporting, your budgeting, and your tax preparation. It could, really, if your data is not accurate, you're going to spend a lot of time at the end of the year trying to make it accurate. That's why it's important to take the time to properly review and categorize your files throughout the year, preferably as you upload your files and your expenses to Neat. So taking this extra time to review your documentation can save you money, time, and energy. Ensuring that you have accurate financial records also prevents, costly errors potentially. It ensures that you remain tax compliant, and it also maximizes those tax deductions. To the right here, you'll see the average times it takes to review your files on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. And as you can see, the more frequently you review your files, the more time you save yourself at the end of the year by not having to review everything all at once. And actually, data shows that on average, it takes just 1 minute to verify your file's data as you enter it to Neat. And that effort increases exponentially the longer that you wait to review your files. So it's best to just upload them as you get them and make sure that they're accurate as you upload them. You want to make sure you're doing that before you start preparing your taxes. It is going to make your tax prep season much easier and so much more stress-free. Now, to help you track your expenses in real time and to make sure that your data is accurate and organized, we recommend that you set aside time daily or weekly to review your newly added files and follow our recommended 3-step organization workflow to ensure that your data remains accurate, is categorized, well organized, and ready for tax time. So these are the 3 steps here. You need to make sure that you review your files and check that they're accurate. Now, Neat will help you out with this step because as you add files to Neat, they're all going to be easily identifiable and easy to find. Neat is going to filter all of those files to the needs review filter. It's a filter to the left of your Neat account. All new files that are added to Neat end up in that filter so that you can easily identify what you've recently added and see exactly which files you need to review for accuracy. Neat is also going to help you with this step by extracting key information from your files with our OCR technology as well. So once you have verified that your dates, your amounts, and your vendors are all accurate, you then want to make sure that each one of your files' expense category fields is filled in with the category that best represents the type of expense it is. And these expense categories will be important to your CPA or tax professional, and it's going to allow them to quickly find which expenses might be considered a deduction for you. And lastly, you need to make sure that you place your file in the right folder within your cabinet. And again, my personal preference is to store all my expenses in one expenses folder for the year, ensuring that I don't miss a single expense in my tax report for the year. And while that might seem really simple, you'd be surprised at how often our support team helps the user discover that they accidentally stored a file in the wrong folder, the wrong year, or even not in a folder at all. Now, we have a whole webinar called The Beginner's Guide to File Organization, and this webinar goes over this workflow in a lot more detail. So I recommend checking out that webinar if you want to learn more about data entry in Neat and how you should save your files in Neat and follow this workflow as well. However, we did also put together a handout for you guys about this in case you don't have the opportunity. This handout is going to dive a bit deeper into the importance of data accuracy. It's going to dive more into this 3-step workflow, and it also is going to provide you a bunch of expense category samples that you can use for your own data set. It might it might inspire you to add some categories to your own list. This handout is called Data Accuracy and our 3-step organization workflow. So you can download that and keep that. And like I said, it goes over this in a lot more detail. John asks, can you go over how to categorize your expenses? John, when we hop over into Neat for the demo, I can show you what I'm referring to. But also the handout that I just shared literally goes through exactly how you can add categories to your expense categories drop down, and it's going to provide you with examples as well and some sample expense categories. So that might be all you need. All right, so we've talked about how Neat can help you get and stay organized for tax time all year long. Now it's tax time. So what do you need to do to gather and prepare all the documents you've been keeping organized all year long? So here are some ways that Neat helps you to accomplish that. Once you get all your files into Neat, you need to also have a way to get all your files out of Neat when you need to. So Neat helps you to export that data through, you can export both your images and your metadata. So you can export your actual tax documents, the images of your tax documents, the images of your source receipts for your expenses as well to PDF files. You can also export all of the metadata from your expenses, such as your expense categories, your amounts, your dates, even your file notes as well to a CSV file, which can be opened in Excel or Google Sheets so that you can slice and dice that data a bit more. And then there's also report generation. So Neat has the ability to create reports using the data that you add to Neat. And Neat reports provide you with a summary of your data, and they can also include both these file types. So your Neat report will include the PDF images of all of the files in your report. Plus, you can also generate a CSV file of all of the files in your report as well during the report creation process, basically giving you everything you need to know about those files for tax preparation. Now, in Neat, there are a dozen different types of reports that you can run, but I want to specifically talk about the Neat expense report. The reason Neat users like the expense report so much is that it provides you with really everything your CPA needs to do your taxes. The Neat expense report contains a cover page or a high-level overview of all of the category subtotals and expenses within your report. It provides you with a line-by-line breakdown of all of the file field data for each receipt or each expense within your report. And it also includes all of the file images for all of your expenses in the report as well. So you have all of those source images as well if you need it. So for example, if your CPA has any questions about an expense within the report, they can quickly go right to the source receipt that you included in the report for an answer, which will save both you and your CPA time. So let's go ahead and let's create an expense report together. I'm going to create an expense report for my 2024 expenses. And remember, these are expenses that I can claim as a deductible in my tax return. Now, if you're not 100% sure which expenses are tax deductible, then a CPA is really what I would recommend I would recommend you talk to a CPA who can help you identify which expenses are deductible, and they'll help you maximize those deductions. And you can use Neat to give your CPA a list of your entire year's worth of expenses and have them help you identify which expenses can be deducted. And that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to create an expense report for all of my expenses from 2024 that I can give to a tax professional who can help me identify what is deductible. If you're more familiar with what expenses are typically considered a deductible expense, then you can also create a filtered expense report that will only show, those types of expenses, and, it'll be a little bit more straightforward for your tax professional as well. When I'm done creating my report, I'm also going to be very careful to make sure that I save my report in the same tax documents folder with all of my other tax documents for 2024 that I need for filing my taxes, which will make it super easy for me to share everything with my CPA when I'm ready. So let's go ahead and let's hop into Neat now. To access reports in Neat, you're simply going to click on the reports button up here at the top right-hand corner of Neat. And here we can see all the different types of reports that are available. So I have my transactions reports here at the top, and then I have my file cabinet reports here at the bottom. Now, the file cabinet reports are pretty self-explanatory. They are going to be reports that you can generate for files in your file cabinet. But some of you here today might not be seeing the transaction reports, and that's because you need to have a Neat Plus Automated Insights plan in order to access transaction reports. What the Neat Plus Automated Insights plan gives you is it allows you to connect your financial accounts to Neat, like your bank and your credit card and your loan accounts to Neat specifically. And that will allow you to stream in transactions as they occur into your Neat account. The reason that I love this for tax time is because transaction streaming makes sure that you don't miss a single expense throughout the year. Where the file cabinet is a much more manual process. You need to do the work of getting all of those files within your file cabinet through one of the 6 upload methods that we talked about earlier. Whereas with accounts and transactions, all of these transactions are streaming in automatically. So I don't need to worry necessarily about uploading or making sure I didn't miss an expense. I'm literally seeing the raw data that's coming from my financial institutes directly in Neat. And the other cool thing with accounts and transactions is that you can also match your transactions with matching source receipts. So if you've uploaded the source receipt for a specific transaction, you can actually match the transaction to that receipt in your file cabinet, and you can include those images in your expense report as well. If anybody here is interested in trying out these transactions features, I have a special 30-day free trial that I'm going to share with you guys right now. This trial is going to pop up at the bottom left-hand corner of this webinar. And it says like opt me in for a no risk free trial. If you're interested in trying these features out, let us know in that form. We'll give you 30 free days to try it out. There's no risk. If you don't like the features or you don't want to use those features moving forward, they'll just stop. You'll stop seeing them as an available feature after 30 days. So no risk whatsoever. And like I said, the accounts and transactions is unique in that, there's so much less manual work that you have to do in accounts and transactions. Not to mention there are other automated features as well, such as vendor mapping, where you can map categories and vendors there. There is suggested automated matching, where Neat will suggest matches from your transactions and your file cabinet as potential matches and things like that. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and let us know, and someone will follow up with you later on today with details about the trial. So let's go back into Neat then. So I am going to be doing I'm going to do a file cabinet expense report today. I'm not doing a transactions expense report. However, the process is exactly the same. So if you do have transactions and you're creating a transactions expense report, the steps are exactly the same. It's 3 steps. Select the report, filter the report, name the report. So they're all the same. You can follow the same steps for your transactions. So I selected my report, the type of report I want to run. Step 2 is to refine my report. This is why I said it was important, or I said I prefer to store all of my expenses for the year in one folder. And the reason is this step. When you're filtering your report in Neat, you can only select one folder at a time. I can't select multiple different folders. So if I had expenses across multiple different folders, I couldn't select them all to make sure those expenses in those folders are included in this report. For me, because everything is in my 2024 expenses folder, or a copy is in my 2024 expenses folder, I can simply filter to this folder. If I had data across multiple different folders, then what I could do is I would recommend that you filter your report by date instead. So you can do previous and you can do previous year. And then you'll also need to be careful that you are not including any business expenses and mixing business and personal expenses together. So you're probably going to need to add another type of filter, either a tax category filter if you want to make sure that you're only including expenses with certain tax categories or certain expense categories, or a specific payment type as well. Might be one of the ways that you can filter your report also. You can see you can also add project and customer filters here as well if you know that all the receipts associated with certain projects should be in here. And you can actually select multiple projects, unlike the folders. So like you can use that projects category field to include certain types of projects in there. So we'll click next step. In the next step, I'm going to name my report. So I recommend that you are specific as possible in the naming of your report. It's going to make it so much easier to identify what this report is related to later on. So I always recommend that you include the year in the name of the report. So I'll say like 2024 expenses, and we'll just say tax return deductions. If I can spell today. I can also select a folder for where I want to save this report. I'm going to save it right in my 2024 tax documents folder. That way, not my tax documents folder will not only have all my income documentation, but this expense report with all my expense documentation for 2024 as well. And then I can also add some notes, though I do want to clarify that these notes will not be included in the report itself. They will be included in the notes section of the file that is created for this report once it's created. And I'll show you that in a moment. So I can say like, to be sent to my CPA for deduction review. And that's fine. The expense report's the only report type that doesn't allow you to change the filters or the sorting or the grouping, and that's for a reason which we're gonna look at in a moment. But the other tip that I have for you guys is make sure you put a little check mark in this also download as CSV box down here. What is going to happen is when I click create, not only is Neat going to generate an expense report and save it in Neat, but it'll also export a CSV copy of all of the expenses included in this report as well. And the benefit to that is that the expense report doesn't include all of the file fields that are stored in Neat for your expenses, whereas the CSV download is going to include all of those extra fields as well. So you really have all of the data, the image and metadata associated with all of the expenses within this report. So I'm going to go ahead and click create. And here we can see my report is being generated. So we can see the title here. Here's where the notes will end up. So like I said, the notes don't end up on the actual report. They end up in the notes of the file that is created for the report. Now, depending on how large your report is and how many images need to be included in the report, it's going to take a few moments for the report to be generated. I usually just close out of this and come back to it in a moment. Once the report is done processing, you can find it in a couple spots. You can find it in your saved reports filter. This is a quick filter similar to the needs review filter that allows you to quickly find all files within your Neat cabinet that are a report. So a report that you generated in Neat. So you'll see this source report for all of these files. But I can also find it simply in my 2024 tax documents folder, and here it is. When I click on it, it should be done. Yeah, it looks like it's generating now, and here it is. So I can add some more details to it, like the date I created it, the type of report it is. Maybe I'll add a category like taxes to it as well. And then this is why users love this report so much. So here is our cover page. I get a breakdown of all of the different expense categories that are here, along with the total amount spent on each expense category and the total number of expenses that contributes to that amount. So at a high level, your CPA or accountant can quickly go through these different expense categories and see things like materials. That's probably something that could be deducted if it's a material for work. Things like software or tolls or transportation, things that may also be deductible for you if you were using them in the context of work or something. So they can quickly at a high level see like, okay, there's 4 expenses within this report that have the transportation expense category. So I know to look for those and see if any of those are deductible. You also get a total amount at the bottom here as well. So a total number that you've spent on your expenses along with the total number of expenses that contributed to that amount. Then you have your line by line breakdown of all of the expenses in the report. So I get all my vendor details, the expense category details, the dates of all of my expenses. And the report will organize the expenses in order of date. So, the oldest to the newest, basically. You have payment type, all of your amounts, like your amount and your sales tax is included in here. You also have your tax category fields here. So you can see like right at the top, I have a couple of these that have like the form 2106. And I also have all of my notes in here as well. So again, if my CPA has any questions about a particular expense, they can find it in the report and see if I left them any comments for why I've included it in the report. And then, so here's all of the items included in my expense report. You can see it just kind of continues to flow down. And we get this grand total at the end here. Oh, sorry about that. Let's go back in here. And then we have all of my images associated with each one of my expenses. So I can keep scrolling and see all of the images that are included for all of the expenses in this report. And what you'll notice is that each image is assigned a number as well. And that number corresponds with the number of the matching expense here in the line by line data. So we can see that expense number 1 is associated with a expense from Turning Point, which was for a meal and restaurant. And when I go down to expense 1, it is the matching source receipt for that expense with all the details on it. So again, if my my CPA or accountant has a question about expense number 3 here, a SEPTA receipt that I have, they can see that it's expense 3 and they can scroll or find expense 3 in the report, and they can see all the details, all the raw details from the actual physical source receipt if they had any questions. So that makes it, again, they really get everything that they need to answer all the questions they might have about your expenses. The other thing that you guys didn't see is that when I created this expense report, it also created a CSV download as well that downloaded to my downloads folder. And this is what that looks like. This is the expense report, or I'm sorry, the CSV report here. And the CSV report includes some additional data, like it includes the last updated date, the date that you last updated this particular file in Neat. It also includes other fields that are not included in the expense report, such as your customers, your customer list, your project list, your product list, location, and class lists as well. Billable is also on here that is not on the expense report. So if you give your CPA or accountants all your tax documents, your expense report with all of your expenses from the year, and this CSV export of all of your expenses, they're really going to have everything that they need to answer any questions they have and start filing in your taxes and make sure that you get those maximum deductions. Popping back into Neat, I wanted to quickly talk about some of the other tax other tax reports in Neat. These two tax reports, the tax category report and the sales tax report, often confuse users because they explicitly say tax in the name of them. So a lot of people immediately think these are the reports that I need to run for tax time. But I wouldn't necessarily say that is true. While you can absolutely run those reports in combination with the expense report includes all of the data that's included in the tax category and sales tax report. So the difference is that the tax category report is really going to focus in and highlight the tax category drop down and all of these different categories. So we can see it breaks up all of the expenses in my report by tax category, which all of the tax category selections I've made. So we can see, like at the top here, we have my 2 expenses that are associated with Form 2106. And then I have all of my no form non-deductible expenses. And if I scroll down even further, I have some Schedule C ones and everything in here as well. Here's like a Schedule A, and it just groups all of those expenses together associated with a specific tax category. And that's fine if that is all that you need, but the expense report includes this data. So here's the expense report. And again, in the line by line breakdown of your data, which is here, the tax category information is all included here. So you already have it there. You don't necessarily need to create the tax category report if this report gives it to you. Same thing with the sales tax report. The sales tax report specifically highlights the amount you paid in sales tax for each of your expenses. And it groups them in different ways. Like in this instance, I chose to group them by vendor and organize them in, descending order of receipt date. But again, that it's going to focus in on the sales tax data, and it excludes all of the other data associated with the expenses. They can include images just like the other reports, so that you can still include your file images. But again, this sales tax data is all available to you in the expense report. once this finishes opening, you'll see that again in the line by line breakdown, not only do you get all of the tax category breakdowns, but all of the amounts, including the sales tax, is included in the expense report, which is taking a long time to open for some reason. But you can see all of the sales tax data is here and it's calculated for you. And that sales tax data and tax category data is also included in the CSV export that you may have created during the report creation process as well. So that's how you can go about creating an expense report for maximizing your tax deductions each year. So I have everything that I need now in this folder. I have my income documentation, I have some of my other forms in here, a copy of my previous year's tax return, and all of my expenses that my CPA can use to determine whether or not there are any deductions that I can file for. What do I do when I'm ready to share all of this data? There's a couple ways. There's at least 3 different ways we're going to talk about today for how you can share this data. One simple way to do it is by selecting everything in this folder and then clicking send to here at the bottom and clicking email. And this will allow you to email all of these files to whoever you need to email them to, even to yourself if you want to email them to yourself. You can enter an email address, you can update your subject, and you can even add a personalized message and then email those files to that person. When that person receives that email, this is what it's going to look like. So they're going to receive an email from noreply@neatcloud.com. So you can give them the heads up of where it's coming from. If they don't see it, they should check their spam and junk folder, and they can even mark this as a not spam email. They're going to see that you shared a certain number of files with them with any message that you sent to them. And then they get this breakdown of each of the files included in the email. So they can see really quickly which form is what. So that's really great because we're not just sharing like one document that downloads everything. They can, if they only need your W-2, they can just download that. If they only need a copy of your previous year's tax return, they can just download that. So they can see easily which ones they need to download. Clicking any one of these links is going to do that, simply that. It's just going to download that file to their computer. Now, these links do expire after 7 days. So you might want to also give them the heads up that they should download everything as soon as they get the email. Otherwise, after 7 days, you would have to re-email these links to them. And that's for security purposes to make sure that you don't share or email a file with somebody and then years later or months later, they can still access it. You know, there's some security there to make sure that they can only access them for a period of time. Obviously, unless they download them. There's some other ways too that you can share your files in Neat. One way is to share the entire folder with your CPA or accountant or whoever, a coworker who's going to file these taxes for you. By right-clicking on any folder and choosing share, you can share that folder's contents with someone. So we can see I've already shared this folder to one user. What this will do, sharing a folder with a user will allow that user to create an account. It can be free or a paid Neat account, and they'll get their own login credentials that when they log in, they'll be able to see your folder. They will only have the ability to view and download and comment on files. So they won't be able to edit your files. They won't be able to access any other folders in your database. Only the folder you shared with them and any subfolders under that folder. And they can come in and they can comment too. Maybe they have a question about one of the expenses in the report or one of your forms. They can come in and they can write a comment. They can ask you about something. And they can share it. And then this will create actually a log of and a conversation that you have between you and this other person that you can obviously use for auditing purposes in the future if there's ever any question about a tax return that you filed. But they'll be able to not only view everything in this folder, but if you share a specific expenses folder with them, they can also access all of the different expenses and source data for the files in your expense report as well if they need to. So that's another way. The final way is through account sharing. So you can also, if you click on your name up at the top right-hand corner and choose account settings, you can scroll to the bottom and you can actually, if you're on a Neat base or a Neat Plus Automated Insights plan, you can invite up to 4 additional users to your account at no additional cost. And these users will have full access to your file cabinet. They can't access your transactions, they can't access your Neat settings, or like your invoicing or anything like that. They'll only be able to access your file cabinet, but they can access everything in the file cabinet. They can access all your folders. They can also edit, comment, download, all the files within your file cabinet. So it's really up to you to decide which method works for you most. Would you prefer to just email those files to that user and they'll be able to download those files at that point in time? Do you want to share the entire folder with all of your tax documents with someone and give them the ability to view and comment on your files? Or do you want to give someone full access to your file cabinet so they can poke around and look around and see if they can, if they have a question about something, if they can find it on their own? So it's, there's a couple different flavors and you can decide which you prefer. Those are all of the things that I really wanted to talk with you guys about today when it comes to getting prepared for tax season, staying organized all year long, and how you can go about actually preparing that tax return. I want to look at some questions now that have come in. But before I do, I'm going to share 2 handouts with you guys, actually. The first handout I'm going to share with you goes more into detail about sharing these files with other users. So it's called Sharing Your Tax Documents with Your Tax Professional. It should pop up right about now, and it just gives you step-by-step instructions for how you can do all of the different things that we just went over now. And I think it also includes an additional option for exporting your files if you just want to do a straight export of your data instead of emailing or sharing a folder or an account. And then the last handout that I'm going to share with you guys it's called File Like a Neat Pro, or File Like a Pro, Easy Steps to Prepare Your Tax Return. And it's a copy of the slide deck that I went through today. So it includes like the simplified step-by-step process for preparing your tax return, the common types of documents that you might need, and all the tips that we talked about today, from the simplified folder structure to utilizing all the ways that you can upload files to Neat. So I wanted to make sure I share those now, just in case anybody needs to wrap up since we're at the top of the hour. But now I'm going to take some questions. I'm going to take a look and see what types of questions have come in and see if I can answer any of those questions now. First question I'm seeing here, John asks, can you go over Print to Neat in more detail? Great question, John. So Print to Neat is specifically a Windows functionality, and basically what it does is it's included with our Neat desktop application. Let me open up our support center real quick and find that for you. Under our downloads and drivers here, we have a scanning application called the Neat Desktop application. This is the application that allows you to connect a scanner to Neat, either a Neat scanner or a third-party TWIN compliant scanner, and you can scan your files to the desktop application and upload them to Neat. The desktop application also includes steps to configure and set up the Print to Neat feature. What Print to Neat is really going to do, and I'm on a Mac, so I can't actually demonstrate it for you on this Mac, but let me open up the Print to Neat article that we have. What it'll allow you to do is when you're on say you're on a web browser, maybe you just made a purchase. Everybody buy stuff online anymore. I know that I'm in my Amazon account all the time. But basically, when I make a purchase on Amazon and I get that order confirmation page, what I can do is I can choose to print that page. So I would go and I would click print from my file browser as I normally would. And when I choose print, instead of choosing my printer or actually printing out a physical document, once the Print to Neat feature has been configured, you'll have this new printer called Neat Virtual Printer, and you can select that as your printer. And then when you click print, what will happen is the Neat desktop application will pop open, and that file or whatever it is that you're printing will be added to the Neat desktop application so that you can forward that over to Neat. So you get to skip that step of having to like save it as a PDF file and then import it, or actually print a physical copy of it and then scan it. You can skip those things just by using Print to Neat and forwarding it to Neat directly from a confirmation page. So I hope that answers your question, John. Okay, so Marion, not so much of a question as much as a comment. Marion says that the Neat desktop application is way too slow to process a document. I have a couple suggestions for that, Marion. So when it comes to processing documents, it really depends on the processing time is dependent on a lot of different things. For one, depending on how big your file is, could determine how long it takes to process. So every file that you upload to Neat is run through our OCR processor. And through OCR processing, it's going to take every word on every file that you upload to Neat and transform it into a keyword searchable term. So the more words and the more text that you have on a file that you upload, the longer that OCR processing is going to take, the longer it's going to take to process within the application. Another thing that might make your files process slower is also the time of day that you upload files. Typically between like 11 to like 5 Eastern time is like some of our most popular, and it's the time of the day that our processing queue is the most busy. So every file that is uploaded to Neat is sent through the same processing queue. So that queue starts to get overfilled with things during that time of the day because many people are using Neat at that point in time, and everybody's uploading files at the same time, and so processing may take a little bit longer. You could try maybe uploading your files earlier in the morning or later in the evening to potentially see a faster processing time. Another reason that you might see your files processing slowly is that the desktop application, while it is a web application, it can like time out from time to time, just like a web application. And you might need to force the application to reload in order to see that your file has finished processing. So basically, you might see that your file looks like it's still processing, but Neat on the cloud side has finished processing that item and it's sitting in your processing queue until you actually refresh the application so that you can see those updates. You might see that file as processing. So you could also try just force refreshing the application to see if your file is finished processing at that point. That's the same thing that we would recommend to anybody who's logged into like the web application as well. So that those three things might help with your files, with processing them a little bit quicker. If there are, if the things that I just mentioned don't help at all, what you can also do is you can also reach out to our support team and give them some sample item IDs of files that are taking a long time to process. And then we can look at those individually and see why they might be taking a longer time to process and either get you an answer or maybe improve processing as well. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, let's see. John asks, can you delete an expense category if you made a mistake? Absolutely, John, you can. Now, the deletion process is not straightforward when it comes to expense categories because we don't want you to just be able to necessarily delete an expense category if it's been potentially assigned to multiple expenses. However, there are a couple ways that you can delete an expense category. One of the ways that you can do it is simply by merging the mistaken expense category with the right expense category. So for example, let me see if I have any ones here that I can potentially do this with. So like I have office supplies and office supply, and obviously I don't need both of them. Maybe I want to keep office supplies, but I want to get rid of the office supply here. What I could simply do is take both of these two and merge them as one, and I can merge them into office supplies. And then what'll happen is Neat is actually going to go through all of my files across my database, updating any of my files that are listed as office supply, and will update it to office supplies with the proper spelling. So that's one way you could do it. The other way that you could do it is simply by removing the expense category from the files that have that expense category. So for example, let me do like a quick filter here. So if I go into all files and I filter to receipts and I add let's give it a second. I add a category for, I don't know, let's try like building supplies, see if I have one there. So I only have one file for building supplies. Let's see, is there another one? Better one here, like entertainment. I probably have a ton in entertainment. Yeah, here we go. So I could look for all of the files in my database under all files that have the misspelled or the incorrect category. And I could simply bulk edit or edit that category out. And then once no files within my database have that category applied to them, they will simply drop off of my category list. The way that the category list works is it updates itself dynamically based off of which expense categories are actually applied to your files. So if there isn't any files in your database that exist with that mistaken expense category, that expense category will drop off that list. So I hope that answers your question. All right. I think that's where we're going to wrap for the day. If there are any questions that haven't been answered that we need to get to, don't worry, we'll send you guys an email before the end of the day getting you an answer. Otherwise, I really appreciate your guys' time today. As always, I'm going to share a quick poll with you guys right now. This poll is going to pop at the bottom left corner of this webinar, and it gives you the opportunity to tell us how we did. Let us know if this webinar was helpful. This particular survey asks some additional questions about how you use Neat to prepare your tax return and whether or not Neat has everything you need to prepare your tax return. So let us know when you see that survey. I hope that everybody has a fantastic rest of the day, and we'll see you guys next week for another webinar. Thanks, guys.